History being made tonight. Venezuela taking one giant leap towards freedom as hundreds of thousands of protesters take to the streets, demanding embattled socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro step down immediately. The current leader of the opposition, 35-year-old Juan Guaido, you see him there on stage swearing himself in front of tens of thousands of people. He is the new president of Venezuela. This happened just hours ago in the capital city of Caracas. Along with the rest of the free world, President Guaido has the backing of the White House, with President Trump officially recognizing him as that country's rightful leader, along with Canada, along with Brazil, along with many, many other nations. But tonight, socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro is still clinging. He is fighting tooth and nail as we speak to hang on to his dictatorship, and he's retaliating by breaking off relations with the U.S. and accusing our country of trying to orchestrate a coup. This afternoon, just moments after Juan Guaido's announcement, I sat down exclusively with Vice President Mike Pence in Washington, D.C. Freedom, he says, is winning. Watch. So we have a new president now in Venezuela, Presidente Guaido. You recognized him. The president recognized him today, and millions took to the streets today in Venezuela. Tell me what's going on in that country and why it's important that they have changed.
The people of Venezuela have suffered so much under the Maduro regime. It's amazing to think that today 9 out of 10 Venezuelans live in poverty. When we traveled in 2017 to Colombia, we met with refugees, a grandmother who, with her 4 grandchildren, marched all the way across Venezuela to go to Colombia because she said it had gotten so bad in their small town that the children had to rise at 4 in the morning to get 1 ticket to buy a piece of bread at 4 in the afternoon. The Maduro regime has oppressed its people. It's become a haven for criminals and narco-terrorists. And President Trump has taken decisive action over the last 2 years to bring sanctions on officials in the Maduro regime. We've isolated the regime economically and diplomatically. And today, freedom broke out in Venezuela with the recognition of a new interim president in Juan Guaido, a courageous man who stepped forward, the president of the National Assembly who took the oath of office. And I couldn't be more proud that at President Trump's direction, the United States of America became the first country in the world to recognize President Guaido, and now many other nations join us as well. But the real work lies ahead, and the United States is going to continue to bring the full weight of our economic and diplomatic pressure until freedom and democracy and fair elections are restored for the people of Venezuela.
You mentioned that the work lies ahead. As it currently stands, and this may change by the time we're on the air this evening, but as it currently stands, Nicolas Maduro still thinks he's president and has not expressed any willingness to resign. What happens to him in this interim? The world recognizes President Guaido. The people seem to, just judging by the millions in the streets. But what if Nicolas Maduro says, hey, I'm not leaving?
Nicolas Maduro is a dictator with no legitimate claim to power. The National Assembly is the duly elected representative of the people, and through their constitutional system, and now the interim president, Juan Guaido, it represents the will of the people. And you saw that will literally. Hundreds of thousands of people in demonstrations all across Venezuela today. It was truly inspiring to President Trump and me to see the way that people are rising up, reclaiming their birthright of libertad. And our message to them before, during, and after today's action is that we are with you. The American people stand with you. We see this as a hemisphere of freedom. And we will stand with the people of Venezuela until they reclaim freedom and democracy for their people.
I want to get to that hemisphere issue in a second, but back to Nicolas Maduro. Does he still have enough control over the military? And if so, how challenging does that make the coming days ahead? Don't forget, we tried this, or it was tried with Hugo Chavez back around 2002. It only lasted a couple days. Right. Things were different then, and he didn't quite have as many people there on the ground on his side. But, you know, it was fleeting. How do you make sure that this is a lasting change in Venezuela? Well,
I think the outpouring of support for President Guaido today, for a democratically elected National Assembly, not only made an impression on the world, but we hope that Nicolas Maduro will accept a peaceful transition of power in Venezuela, that he will accept the will of the people to move his country forward and embrace their new president, Juan Guaido. Look, the people, as President Trump said today, that the people of Venezuela have suffered enough. I mean, 3 million Venezuelans have fled their country because of deprivation and oppression and poverty. 2 million more are expected to flee Venezuela in the next year alone. The country is literally a failed state. And what President Guaido represents is a new beginning for the people of Venezuela. And thanks to President Trump's leadership, the United States of America is standing with the good people of Venezuela for that new beginning. It is remarkable, and you covered this more than anyone else on the airwaves, Trish. Here is a country that was arguably the second most prosperous nation in our hemisphere. I mean, its oil reserves are second only to those that we find in Saudi Arabia. And yet, because of the oppression, the deprivation, the dictatorship, and the socialists of the Maduro regime, we've seen poverty, the likes of which Latin America has not seen for decades. That can change. The beginning of that change, we hope and pray, is today with the appointment of a new interim president, and then moving to free and fair elections. The people of Venezuela rose up today, and they should know that the American people stand with them. It was really remarkable to see, and some very brave people there on the ground that are risking their lives to do that. And it's nice to know that America stands for freedom and democracy. And I hope the people get that opportunity. Let me ask you about this, because the president's policies have been seen by some as to be somewhat isolationist. And he would say, listen, we don't need to bother being in places that we don't need to be. It's a waste of our time, our money, our resources, et cetera. But he does think it's important, and you think it's important, to take a stand on Venezuela. Why? Well, President Trump has made no secret of the fact that he is not a fan of American deployments all over the world and American entanglements. Our first president, George Washington, had the same concerns. And yet President Trump has always had a very different view of our hemisphere. He's long understood that the United States has a special responsibility to support and nurture democracy and freedom in this hemisphere. And that's a long-standing tradition in this country. Monroe Doctrine, right? And also, but look, this is not just about promoting the ideals of freedom. A failed state has no borders. Venezuela is a failed state. It has become a haven for narcotics and international criminal organizations that are part and parcel of the illegal immigration crisis that we are confronting at our southern border. Another caravan is beginning to make its way north. It's reached the border of Mexico and Guatemala. And there's no question that human traffickers and narcotics and drug cartels in Central America are driven in part by the malign influence of the failed state in Venezuela. And so let's be clear, the United States stands for prosperity and the rule of law and democracy for the people of Venezuela, but we also believe that it's in the interest of the United States of America for Venezuela to return to the rule of law, to return to democracy, and become a full partner in advancing the security of all the countries in this region. So as we look at the
the border crisis and we see these caravans making their way to the U.S., what you're touching on, I think, is pretty important, that the region itself needs to have the best possible opportunities for prosperity, which means it needs a free election system. You need to get rid of some of the corruption, et cetera. Venezuela could have a hand in that. You know, you told me a couple months back that one of your concerns with these caravans is that they were being financed and encouraged by people who did not have the best intentions for America, a lot of radical leftists you mentioned as well, and Venezuela was in that bunch. Having a new government, a new leader in Venezuela, how does that change things as far as the caravans go?
Well, in my conversation more than a week ago with Juan Guaido, and now President Guaido of Venezuela, we spoke about a renewed partnership between the United States of America and Venezuela. And we look forward to stronger economic ties for the benefit of both of our people, but we look forward to greater cooperation to meet the humanitarian and the security challenges that both of our countries face. But look, we're in the midst of a government shutdown now, a month in the making, because President Trump is absolutely determined to secure our border, to build a wall, to get our border agents and our Homeland Security the resources that we need to enforce our laws and secure our borders. The president's taken steps to offer common sense and bipartisan solutions, and we remain hopeful. But better partnerships in Central America. I spoke with the president of Honduras this week on just this topic, and a stronger partner in Venezuela will make it more possible for us to achieve that for the American people and for the region.